I pressed play. For the next 63 years, I watched every second of Muhammad's life. No missing pages, no commentators, no debates over chains of narration, no historians filling in gaps, just a continuous recording of one man's life. When the tape ended, I expected to know whether I had watched God's final prophet or one of history's greatest frauds. Instead, I came away with a conclusion that was far more complicated. As an ex-Muslim atheist, I think I watched someone who was probably sincere, undeniably brilliant, and morally impossible for me to follow. This is not how Muslims are taught to see Muhammad. It is also not how many ex-Muslims describe him. This is simply what I think I would notice after watching his life unfold with my own eyes. The first surprise came before Islam even existed. If the tape had stopped when Muhammad turned 40, I would probably have walked away with a favorable opinion of him. I saw a man whom people trusted, someone known for honesty, someone people approached to resolve disputes. I saw a long marriage to Khadija that appeared stable and loyal. I saw someone withdrawing to the cave of Hira, not to build a political movement, but because he genuinely seemed dissatisfied with the world around him and wanted answers. Nothing about those 40 years screamed con artist to me. In fact, if you had asked me then whether this man would later claim to speak for God, I probably would not have predicted it. Then came the first revelation. This is where I became less interested in theology and more interested in psychology. The first question I asked was simple. Is anything objectively supernatural happening outside Muhammad? Can anyone else independently observe what he observes? Watching the tape, I still would not receive the sort of public, unmistakable revelation that I personally think an all-powerful God could provide. But my second question was directed entirely at Muhammad himself. What is happening inside his mind? Watching every private moment, I think I would gradually conclude that Muhammad probably believed he was receiving revelation. His fear, confusion, hesitation, his conversations with Khadija, his prayers before battles, his repeated confidence that God would not abandon him. All of this points me away from deliberate deception and toward genuine conviction. That would change my opinion of Muhammad. It would not change my opinion about whether Islam is true. Sincerity answers a psychological question. It does not answer a metaphysical one. The next thing that struck me was his intelligence. Watching 23 years unfold in real time, I think I would describe Muhammad as a genius. He persuaded people from radically different backgrounds. He built institutions. He navigated crises. He adapted when circumstances changed. He inspired astonishing loyalty. Whether one attributes that to revelation or human ability, the achievement itself is extraordinary. Very few people in history have changed the world as profoundly as Muhammad did. But then came the scenes that permanently shaped my moral judgment. The first is Awtas. According to the Islamic sources, some companions hesitated to have sexual relations with captive women because those women already had living husbands among the defeated enemy. Muhammad permitted it. Watching that scene unfold, not reading about it centuries later, but actually seeing frightened captives, hesitant companions, and the final decision, I think that would become one of the defining moments of the documentary for me. For my moral framework, captivity destroys meaningful consent. The fact that some of the women were already married makes the scene even more difficult for me to reconcile with the title, Mercy to the Worlds. The second scene is Banu Qurayza. I would watch the executions. I would watch the women and children left behind. I would watch enslavement become the outcome. I understand the historical arguments Muslims make about wartime treason. I understand that 7th century Arabia was not the 21st century. Even after granting every bit of historical context, I still could not call what I witnessed morally perfect. The same tension appears elsewhere. Amputation for theft. Reports prescribing death for apostasy. Traditions concerning punishment for same-sex acts. These are not tiny footnotes. They become part of the big picture of Muhammad that I have to evaluate. Interestingly, these later events do not erase the earlier Muhammad. That is what makes the documentary emotionally difficult. I still remember the thoughtful man in the cave. I still remember the loyal husband. I still remember someone who appeared genuinely convinced that God was speaking to him. The problem is that I also remember Awtas. I also remember Banu Qurayza. I also remember punishments that I cannot morally defend. The same man who inspired love among those closest to him also made decisions that, from my perspective, displayed a capacity for profound cruelty. There are also smaller moments that caught my attention. When Muhammad gave agricultural advice that proved ineffective and later remarked that people knew their worldly affairs better than he did, I found myself asking exactly where revelation ended and ordinary human judgment began. When traditions describe him revising practical conclusions after observing how others lived, I became interested in how he distinguished divine guidance from personal reasoning. Those moments did not convince me he was a fraud. They reminded me that I was watching a human being navigating an extraordinarily complicated life. When the tape finally stopped, my conclusion surprised me. I did not think I had watched an obvious liar. I did not think I had watched a morally perfect prophet. I thought I had watched one of history's most remarkable human beings, a man who probably believed every word he preached, a man of exceptional intelligence and leadership, a man whose compassion toward those who he loved was real, and a man whose decisions in several pivotal episodes prevent me, as an atheist, from accepting him as a universal moral example for humanity. If you are Muslim, you might watch the same tape and see God's messenger. I watched the same life and saw something else. I saw a sincere man. I saw a genius. I saw a man capable of both tenderness and, in my moral judgment, profound cruelty. That is how Muhammad's life looks through the eyes of one ex-Muslim atheist.